In for Elizabeth Vargas. We appreciate your time. Good night.
$3.60 as we are about to begin the unofficial start of summer. That right now is the price of gas. It's actually not horrible compared to a year ago, nearly the same exact amount. But is perception the reality for the incumbent? Plus, Donald Trump name checks possible vice presidential candidates. Who he mentioned, who he didn't, what he is saying now about Nikki Haley, and college football's Hail Mary. The NCAA striking a multi-billion-dollar deal with athletes, but they are still likely going to need something else on their team. The United States Congress. Come on in, I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go, hanging out with us today on this Friday. Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Tia Mitchell is a correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, NewsNation contributor as well. And Carly Atchison, former spokesperson for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Hello to you all. Happy Friday. Nice to have you all in.
Happy Friday.
We're going to get to the weekend. Eventually. We're not there yet. At least another hour that you got to stick with us here. I think, or more, a few.
It's not, they don't have to stick with it. They get to stick with it.
There you go. Come on in. Like I said, welcome you in. As we start off here, a live look really right now at what's happening in spots all across the country. This is New York City. Ships have been pulling into the Hudson River for Fleet Week, which is happening throughout this Memorial Day weekend. Let's head down south a bit to the Jersey Shore, Seaside Park, where the sun is shining on what is likely going to be the first beach week of the year for some. Would you look at that? Looks great there. You might be one of the 44 million traveling as we head down south to Atlanta, Georgia right now. And this is a live look. I think that's I-75 there. Actually doesn't look too bad.
That's not bad.
No, coming out of rush hour, headed into Memorial Day.
That can't be Atlanta.
That's Atlanta. I promise you.
Okay,
Well, there you go. There's a little bit of traffic there. That's probably
That's Atlanta.
But if you're about to fill up your tank, you don't necessarily need to cringe, believe it or not. AAA says the average gallon of gas today, $3.60. You see there, it's basically exactly where we were this time last year. But for those of you firing up your grills who plan on doing so this weekend, the average barbecue for a family right now is in the area of $30. That is up roughly 10% from last year. And if we zoom out, go back to Memorial Day weekend 2021, the first Memorial Day for President Biden in office, you can see how prices have climbed. Gas, for example, up 28%. Your airfare right around that number as well. Meat up 19%. Your favorite drink probably in the area of around 11% or so. So that's sort of the lay of the land here, Chris, on sort of the number one issue that we're going to be following over the next handful of months or so.
Well, first, I want to apologize to everybody for what I've done myself to meat prices, for what I'm putting away. I know that I'm part of that, and I accept my role. For the president, here's the reality. Who does inflation hit first? The working class, right? People who are in the lower quintiles of the workforce. They feel it first because they have the least amount of disposable income. Who stops feeling it last? Those same people. And the reality for Joe Biden that he and his team are confronting every day is that around the country, these are the voters he needs to come home. He needs these voters to come back. They should be, a lot of these should be his voters. And I understand why they resent the status quo and they're eager for change.
What are they saying in Georgia right now?
Well, exactly what Chris said. But the other problem for Biden is there's just not a lot he can do.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day, we're a country that prides itself off letting businesses pretty much leave them to their own devices.
Free market principles, right?
Free market principles. So they, you know, a lot of ways set their own prices, particularly, you know, things that aren't so. There are market forces, yes, in the pandemic and the shortages and all of that stuff. Gas is another thing because there are international markets to deal with. But at the end of the day, there's very little for the president to put his finger and say, do this and drop prices, but he gets all the blame.
Like any other president does. But I will say this, local gas stations in any jurisdiction have a lot to say on their price. And corporate greed or corporate price raising also has to be factored into this whole inflation piece and the emotional disconnect between it. Because wages, if you look at wages economically, they're up. And if you throw in the pandemic and the money that was poured into the economy, people may be frustrated, but they have more money and these prices are rising and they have a pretty decent outlook towards their future. Not everyone, but most of the polling says they have a decent outlook because they have more money.
I hear you. Look to your left because it's coming for you right there. I see it.
I'm pretty sure you're not looking to my left.
Don't look,
this
Carly.
is where they placed me. All right, Carly, let me have it.
Well, I think Joe Biden's already doing better. I'm reminded of the tweet that they had when they, for 4th of July, like they got to save 70 cents on a hot dog. I mean, that was so deaf to the reality. You can say prices are better, this, that, other thing. The reality is people aren't feeling that. People are not feeling like they're going to the grocery store and saving a ton of money. And that's the reality. So a lot of the times the White House will point to these statistics. You hear Joe Biden now talking about the stock market for the first time and how great that's doing or whatever. It doesn't matter. People are not feeling like they're saving money. They feel like this economy is not working for them. And unfortunately, on Memorial Day weekend, it's just a sad thing for them to have to deal with.
Republicans are the people who came to the kegger in the backyard, flipped over all the lawn furniture, threw the lawn furniture in the pool, made this huge mess with the Democrats because there was a bipartisan orgy of spending.
Yes, I agree.
Stimulus after stimulus after stimulus because nobody wanted to see the economy contract during the pandemic. And now we're living in the aftermath, and the Republicans are like, I don't know how this. Who put that in the pool? I have no idea, Joe Biden.
This isn't the first inflationary period we've lived through, regardless of how old you are. And so this is the first time I believe I felt that emotional disconnect from statistics and then what's really going on at the dinner table.
The last time we had persistent inflation in the 1960s and 1970s, it was a punishing blow to both parties. And it was the number one issue that drove elections 1968, 1972, 1976, and it went on and on and on.
By the way, I would leave you with this. We show those gas prices numbers, basically the exact same where we were a year ago. That's great, right? Everybody wants to see gas prices stay the same or lower. When President Biden took office, it was at $2.40, give or take a penny or two. Today, $3.60. You often see the price of gasoline go directly in line with presidential polling numbers, whether it goes up or down, something we'll be watching. All right, the other issue, the other top issue, I guess you can say, and it is a fresh reminder tonight of the many challenges Border Patrol agents continue to face along the southern border. Look at this video right here. It's remarkable. Take it in here for a second. You can see agents rushing to a portion of the border wall. This is near El Paso, Texas, as migrants try to climb that wall there. Border Patrol agents confront them head on. You can see there at the top of the wall, those migrants even using a ladder to try to make it from Mexico into the United States, with some even throwing rocks at those agents. So as much as we talk about inflation, this is the other one that we continue to keep the eye on.
And we've continued to wait to hear President Biden, as we've said on this set many times, before the election is going to take executive action on the border. But and he needs to do it for a variety of reasons that relate to persuadable voters. But there is a not inconsiderable faction in his own party that will be very upset with him when he does. And they will accuse him, people like Senator Alex Padilla of California, will accuse him of doing Trump-like policies and do all of this stuff. But from a political perspective, this is like the video we saw of migrants overrunning
with the Texas National Guard.
It's politically untenable.
So let me give you a little dose of good news. Southwest border encounters May this month so far this year, down 37% from April, the daily average, down 61% from December's daily average. But you can see there, May so far still averaging 3,800 encounters day after day after week after week.
But Blake, we cannot talk about the border crisis without including Congress, Democrats and Republicans, because there is legislation. You can talk about executive action with Biden.
It's not happening.
It's not happening. But you see that picture, right? And then you see a bipartisan bill that the Republicans have rejected. And I'm not playing the blame game, but it would have allowed the president to shut the border down. It would have made it tightened up asylum. And it also would have it would have increased border patrols, all giving money, if I may. And as a result, And Congress still can't get it done. So I'm not blaming the Democrats or the Republicans. What I'm saying is the Republicans have a bill. I think it's Bill 01 or 02.
HR 2, and I was going to say, and that's what Carly was probably going to jump in here next and say, well, we have our bill, HR 2. None of this is going anywhere. Right. But people are going to continue to see images like that.
But what I was going to say actually was that
Did I get it wrong?
Well, yes, because the president does not need Congress to take action on the border. This is something he can do today. He can say, declare a national emergency at the border, and there's a lot of executive power he has when it comes to securing the border. He doesn't want to do it because, to your point, Blake, like you said, that puts him in trouble with a big part of his party. And again, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. He is not going to take any action on the border. He says he's going to take executive action. If he was going to do it, he would have done it. He's not doing it.
Right. But, Blake, executive action with no money is toothless.
Yeah,
it's not going to solve that issue.
That's not true.
It's not going to solve that issue.
When you declare a national emergency at the border, that opens up a lot of different levels, including economically speaking, and money and resources you can put at the border as President of the United States.
Come on in, Art Del Cueto, who is the Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, the union that represents Border Patrol agents. Art, nice to see you as always. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill once again. You see that video, you think what, sir?
It's frustrating. It's frustrating, and I'll tell you, this continues to happen. I myself have been part of one of the individuals that has been attacked at times by these individuals that are trying to cross the border. And why is it they're doing it? Because they're empowered. They know they can continue to do it, and they're not going to face any consequences. You guys just mentioned, what happened in El Paso with the 300 that came across. How many actually got prosecuted? That's what you see. Where's the Mexican government when it comes to this? Look, it's right there on the border. It's near El Paso. Where's the authorities on the other side? Our good neighbors to the south. How come they're not responsible?
Is the Mexican government are they helping though? Because as I mentioned those numbers, we have seen them go down this month, which is great, right? We want to see that happen at the border. So what is leading to that?
They've gone down, but they're still unsustainable numbers. You're still having the same amount of agents that are stuck in the processing centers. You're not having more agents out there in the field. And at the same time, without having agents in the field, you have your gotaway numbers that during this administration, they're close to 2 million gotaways. And, we can go back and forth and say, look, there's bills out there. Neither side's trying to come across, fix the issue. But at the end of the day, who created this mess? How did it get started? This administration ignored it for the first several years. And now, when it's close to elections, now they want to talk about it. And they want to say, let's do something to stop it. It never should have gotten to this.
The Republican architect of that border bill is Senator James Lankford. As we know, and as we've been through, he now voted against the bill. Donald Trump came in, blew the whole thing up. So I spoke to the senator the other day, earlier this week, Art, and I asked him if he's heard from anyone, if he's heard from the White House, if he's heard from Donald Trump. This was his response. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
The White House has not reached out. The president has not reached out. No Democrat has reached out. Chuck Schumer has not reached out to me on this one.
And he went on to say he hasn't heard from Donald Trump as well. So there's silence on both sides. Aren't both to blame?
Correct. Yeah, but when we sit there and we say, he hasn't heard from Donald Trump is not the president of the United States right now. He should be hearing from some of these individuals that are in a position, legally in a position of power where they can make a change, and he's not hearing from anyone. And that's where the huge problem is. But who's suffering? Who's suffering out of this? The American public continues to suffer. The drug cartels control the southern border. They do not care what side of the aisle who's who. They just want to come across, create these type of distractions. All the while, they continue to bring heroin, methamphetamines, and fentanyl into the United States. And when they're bringing it into the U.S., they don't care who's buying it. They don't care if the kids that are purchasing drugs, if their parents voted right or left. That doesn't matter. Right. The only that are winners out of this is the drug cartels, the criminal element. These attacks will continue to happen because there's no consequences. And how do you stop it? Because we got to talk about how to stop it. Start detaining people. Do not release them. Detain them, and you show them that it's not going to be a free ticket. You can't just ask for asylum and get released. The numbers will drop on their own.
Art, I'll leave you with this. As we were watching that video, I was telling the folks up here on the panel, it's a reminder of how difficult the job is of those agents day in and day out, week after week at the southern border. Thanks for being with us here, Art Del Cueto. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
I'll give you. I know you wanted to jump in here real quick.
Well, I just get troubled because it's easy to just boil it down to what we are and aren't doing. But one of the reasons why this is so complicated is because, let's say we just start arresting everyone at the border. Then you're talking about all the money for detention. You're talking about possibly separating families. You're talking about possibly public safety and public health risks, because you're detaining a lot of people in small spaces. So instead of talking about the nuances and the complexity and forcing our leaders to actually do something about it, getting to the root causes, it always becomes this kind of finger pointing and oversimplification.
All right. So, by the way, but before we head to break here real quick, the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, remember what he got into earlier this year and the questions around him? We are now hearing he will transfer his authority to his deputy this evening as he undergoes a quote-unquote minimally invasive and non-surgical procedure. The Pentagon announcing this afternoon that the procedure is related to an issue that Austin suffered as a result of treatment he underwent for prostate cancer last year. Now, the announcement comes after the Pentagon did not notify the President of the United States in January about the Secretary's hospitalization. Clearly, they have learned from that incident. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill over the next 44 minutes or so. A historic settlement between the NCAA and college athletes that could be a seismic shift in college sports. And now they're asking for Congress's help. We'll explain. Plus, the role of crypto in presidential elections. They might actually be, the crypto community, one of the big winners here in Washington over the last couple of weeks. We'll speak with one of the heads of Coinbase here later in the show. But first, on the other side of the break, you are going to be breaking down what?
Oh, yeah, we got fresh, delicious new poll numbers. We're going to get into
Marquette
those.
Law, right?
Marquette
That's the
Law.
good stuff.
We got good polls, and we're going to talk about, there's a little good news for Biden, there's a little good news for Trump. It's a tie, folks.
All right. That's on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back to The Hill here on NewsNation. A story for both President Biden and Donald Trump to tell. The president has drawn dead even with Trump in a new national poll, but the former president also maintains a stronger position in all the crucial swing states. Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris.
Okay, this is the good stuff. This is I guess since it's in Wisconsin, we should say this is a very fresh bratwurst. Mm-hmm. This is the freshest brat.
Spotted cow.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Okay, so this is latest poll from Marquette University Law School. They do a nice job. And what is it? It's a tie. But what was it in November? Yes, it was a substantial advantage just outside the margin of error for Donald Trump. How come? What happened? How did Joe Biden get this race into a tie? And here's the answer. That's independent voters from then to now, from February to now, what has happened. And this represents, when you get down to it, almost a 25-point swing, net, for independents from Trump to Biden. And that's exactly what Joe Biden needs to make this horse race a horse race. But I hear you out there. I hear you saying, Chris, who cares about the national polls? It just comes down to the swing states. You and your bow tie, your fancy bow tie, you're talking about these national polls. What about the swing states? Well, we've got the primo stuff on swing states, too. This was a poll that was done for the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, and there it is. Donald Trump does, in fact, lead substantially inside the margin of error, but still substantially in an average of all 7 of the swing states. You add in RFK Jr. and others, and Trump's margin is even better. Okay, so we know that. Why do we care about the national polls? Here's why. This was the result of the national election in 2020. Joe Biden won by 4.5 points. It's pretty good, right? That's enough. How did he do when we look at the swing states? Throw the swing states in. His margin of victory in the swing states was 1 point. So here's what we're going to do. You and me, Mr. and Mrs. America, we're going to pay attention to those national polls because we don't get enough swing state polls. We just don't. We don't get enough swing state polls to know what's really going on. But we do know that as this election rolls forward for the next 20 whatever weeks, for the next 24 weeks, here's what we know. The national polls will run ahead of the swing state polls by about 4 points. So Joe Biden needs to be leading in the national popular vote by 3 or 4 points to have a chance to win those swing states. They're swing states because they're less Democratic than the rest of the country. It's a majority Democrat country, but these are the 7 states that Democrats can win, but sometimes don't. That's why we watch him so closely. So just remember that 3 or 4 points is what Biden needs nationally for him to be in contention to win re-election.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. Did you hear that music in your ear?
I know. I thought
they were trying to rush you off.
I was going to say it was like the Oscars.
Yeah,
rapping me. They're going to play me off.
You should have taken your trophy there. Independence, Donald Trump. He's losing independence over the last couple of months. Does that have anything to do with the trial?
Yeah. I mean, I've made the tomato sizing analogy. If you worked at a tomato farm and the tomatoes are coming down the conveyor belt, you can pluck off the big tomatoes first more easily. But as that conveyor belt rolls on, it's harder and harder to pluck off those little tomatoes. Those little tomatoes are less likely voters, and that means they're less partisan. They're more independent. So they will be the ones who will be making up their minds and deciding this election over the next 20 weeks.
Yeah, but Chris, you often talk, and those polls bear this out. I don't think we talk enough about within the margin of error.
Right.
When you use that terminology from a polling standpoint, what does that really mean? Does that mean that it could really be a tie, or that the imperfection of the polling just means inherently it could be 2 to 3 points off?
It means that if Joe Biden comes in at 50%, he could be as low as 47 or as high as 53. Right. Donald Trump. So a 3-point margin of error means that it could be 6 points in either direction, but that's the middle of the probability. That's the most likely probability there. And the number one takeaway from this polling is Joe Biden's doing a lot better, right? Things have improved. The consistent improvement for him over the last several weeks is the race comes into focus and Americans remember that Donald Trump is crazy. And they say, whoa, okay, I forgot about that. Mm-hmm. But the truth for Joe Biden is tied is not good enough for him. He needs, because of the way the Electoral College works, he needs to be ahead by 3-4 points to win.
Question.
Yes.
So how is it, and I trust you because I know you're amazing. Help me understand.
Excellent, amazing. Just keep laying them all. Yeah.
Keep going. Yes.
How is it that Trump can theoretically win and lose the popular vote, but Biden can't?
So the country is a majority Democratic country. There are more Democrats in the United States than there are Republicans, but we have an electoral college system that subdivides our presidential vote into these states. And because Republicans do well with rural voters and in less populous states, they have a built-in structural advantage in the electoral college.
All right, still to come here from the Hill on NewsNation. Donald Trump name-checking some vice presidential candidates. We'll get to that on the other side of the break. RFK Jr. speaking here in Washington, D.C. as well. And did crypto have the best week in Washington? We'll explain. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So he drew a huge crowd in, of all places, the deep blue Bronx. But perhaps the headline came after Donald Trump's Thursday rally. When asked by a local reporter, the former president name-checked 4 people on his vice presidential list. Former U.S. Housing Secretary Ben Carson, the Florida Senator Marco Rubio, the Senator J.D. Vance, and the New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Trump was also asked about Nikki Haley for the first time since she said she'd be voting for him.
Well, I think she's going to be on our team because we have a lot of the same ideas, the same thoughts. I appreciated what she said. She's a very capable person, and I'm sure she's going to be on our team in some form.
Going to be on our team, I'm sure, in some form. Definition of vague.
I mean, I could have called this, and we were saying this on the DeSantis campaign, because those two refused to go after each other during the primaries. This isn't a surprise. She also served under the Trump administration before, so no surprise there. I think Donald Trump is really smart for kind of drawing this who's going to be the VP out.
This is what he does.
He doesn't have to make a decision until July, and the only person who knows who he's going to pick is Donald Trump. So with all this pontificating and people getting their names out there, it's smart.
I'll tell you what sticks out to me when you look at that list. Senator, member of Congress, not a member of Congress.
Yeah.
Dr. Ben Carson, what about him?
I don't see it. I mean, Look, maybe, but at the same time...
going to get you.
Yeah, Mick Mulvaney was here. He would...
Look, I think Ben Carson did a great job. He served in the Trump administration. I think he's very capable, but at the same time, I think this is Donald Trump doing what he does, which is drawing it out, keeping the media's eyes on him, and he's smart to do so.
All right, well, he is known as Charlemagne the God and is as popular as they get on radio. His show, The Breakfast Club, reaches millions of listeners every month, and more than half of the audience is black. On Wednesday, Charlemagne the God appeared on The View and did not succumb to pressure from the hosts of that show to endorse President Biden. He followed up with an appearance on the Megyn Kelly Show and explained why.
Long story short, I always knew that I was here to, be on a platform of some sort. But I didn't know that it would be, I didn't know I would be Captain Save It Joe.
You didn't know he would be Captain Save It Joe. What about him?
Who is Captain Saver Joe?
I don't know. Is there one?
I don't think there's one. I mean, these celebrity endorsements and whether Charlemagne the God endorses someone, you still got to have people on the ground. You got to shore up your base, and people have to be delivered to the polls. And so I think it's interesting. Charlemagne the God did say he wasn't going to vote for someone that was a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
He just, for whatever reason, didn't want to come out and say Joe Biden. But in the end, is he going to deliver votes, and is he going to raise money for what he believes in? He believes in democracy, and he's going to vote for Joe Biden, whether he says it or not.
Should the Biden campaign be concerned with this?
I mean, the Biden campaign, I'm sure, is concerned that there are voters with the platform that have said in the past they have been supportive of him, and they are not right now.
Right.
And it's indicative of a bigger issue that perhaps these voters, not necessarily that they'll vote for Trump, but could they support a third-party candidate? Could they stay home? And that's the problem for Biden. And that's what I want Charlemagne the God and those who are listening to Charlemagne the God to really take heed, is that you can vote however you want. We're a free country. But at the end of the day, either Trump or Biden are going to be president unless something happens to one of them that prevents them from being able to run for president. And so if you stay home or if you vote for a third-party candidate, it's your business, but that means the candidate that you would normally support is less likely to win.
RFK Jr. would like to have a word with you. And he was here in Washington earlier today. RFK Jr., the independent presidential candidate, speaking to delegates at the 2024 Libertarian Party convention. Now, he tried to align with libertarians at the convention, even though he is not a member of that party.
I stand with you in valuing personal liberty. And I promise you that when I'm president, I'm going to protect your right to speak freely. I'm going to protect your right to assemble peacefully. I will protect your freedom to worship. I will protect your right to keep and bear arms.
What'd you hear there from RFK Jr.?
Look, I don't rule out the possibility that as the libertarians weigh who they're going to nominate, right? He said, I'm not looking for the libertarian nomination.
Right.
He said, I'm doing my own thing. I don't need the libertarians. But the speech that he gave there and the entreaty that he made, I would not be surprised if there are libertarians in that room who say, look, if we want to get the biggest splash possible this year, it would be by dominating him. And again, he doesn't align with them on environmental issues. Right. He doesn't align with them on a bunch of stuff, but on a bunch of other stuff, including some conspiratorial views about how the United States government operates. Right. He's got the Venn diagrams overlap pretty nicely for him.
All right, something to watch. Meantime, money in politics, it is just about everywhere. But you might not have known that there is a new player in the political arena, and they're big. The cryptocurrency community. Check this out, for example. The super PAC Fair Shake, which is the pro-crypto super PAC, has now raised north of $100 million. And by the way, they're not done yet. It's been a good couple weeks for crypto. Donald Trump embracing it, his campaign announcing this week they are now accepting crypto donations, while the House of Representatives, bipartisan, by the way, overwhelmingly passed a bill yesterday, or at least advanced a bill, that would help regulate the industry, something that the crypto world wants. President Biden not threatening to veto it. Coinbase, as you might know, is the biggest crypto exchange in the U.S., Joining us now is Coinbase's Chief Policy Officer, Faryar Shirzad. Faryar, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate the time. Nice to talk to you for the first time. I think there's a lot to get to because... Good to talk to you. Yeah, you guys sort of came out of nowhere. I mean, $100 million throughout that community is nothing to scoff at. Trump accepting crypto and donations. What do you make of it?
Well, there have been multiple surveys looking at how many Americans own crypto, and the numbers vary generally between 17 and 20%. And what that tells you is that there are millions and millions of Americans who've decided to opt into the crypto economy, have bought it for a variety of use cases, and embrace the ability to move value effortlessly, seamlessly, and without any cost. And I think it's just been a matter of time for politicians to realize what an opportunity there is to speak to these voters. We've polled them, others have as well. It's a broad cross-section of the population, and I think candidates are increasingly recognizing that they need to speak to this community, and we're gratified by that.
Yeah, so Donald Trump coming out for it, RFK Jr., who we were just talking about, as you know, is pro-crypto. President Biden, through his administration, Gary Gensler's been openly hostile, as you are well aware. But in this House bill that was passed just yesterday, or advanced just yesterday, the president did not threaten to veto it. Do you think he's coming around?
I think so. And ultimately the vote that we had in the House had 71 Democrats join a virtually unanimous Republican caucus in voting for sensible regulations to provide clarity and certainty to the industry and consumer protections to the American people. And it's hard for any president to look at that and recognize that they need to kind of embrace the community that's out there. And so we always felt like that we had the argument on the merits, and it was just a matter of penetrating the political debate, and I think we've begun to do that.
Look, are you guys going to jump into via Fairshake? I know you're not Fairshake, but of course Coinbase has contributed to it. Are you going to jump into the presidential race at all? Because I know out in California you had targeted Katie Porter, a Democrat there. She did not make it through the primary, so in a way, you've been successful. I wonder, though, where you go next, and are you going to jump into the presidential race?
Well, Fairshake operates independently, and they have a pretty substantial war chest, so they've got to make decisions about what to do. And the vote, obviously, the two votes over the course of the last couple of weeks give them a lot of information about where they may want to target their resources. Our focus at Coinbase has very much been to talk to policymakers and candidates at any level of government across both parties. And so when it comes to education and just helping them understand what this technology is about, why it's critical to American national security, and how so many Americans have embraced it. We're eager to do it with candidates of both parties, and at any level of government.
Let me end with this. Any concern about not being able to donate via cryptocurrency? Like, do you think that will be cracked down on, or do you think that's got an easy path going forward?
Well, President Trump took a big step forward by accepting crypto. A number of other candidates have as well. Vivek Ramaswamy did, for example. I think RFK Jr. has. A lot of Democrats and Republicans are doing so. It's really for the candidate to decide whether they want to lock themselves out of this substantial part of the American electorate, or they want to allow these people to, vote with their feet and vote with their wallets. And I hope they will. So it's really up to the candidates to decide what they want to do, but there's mechanisms available. Coinbase has a product that allows this to be done seamlessly and easily, and we're hoping most candidates will ultimately step up and accept crypto as well.
All right, it's clearly a new world out there. Faryar Shirzad, we got to leave it there. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time. Have a nice weekend.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Yep, you got it. All right, still to come here from the Hill on NewsNation. The president of Notre Dame University urging Congress to save, as he put it, the great institution of college sports. This NCAA story. We're showing you Capitol Hill because you know what's going to happen? There's this $2.8 billion settlement. They're going to need Congress.
You can mess with a lot of stuff in American politics.
Do not mess with my football.
When you mess with college football, dudes get riled up.
I say it all the time. Do not mess with my family. Do not mess with my faith. Do not mess with my friends, my health, and do not mess with my football. I think a lot of people sort of feel that way. We're talking about this because there's a huge settlement out there, and now the NCAA wants Congress's help. The other side of the break, you're watching The Hill. Is now coming to the world of college sports. The NCAA agreeing to a nearly $2.8 billion settlement of a class action lawsuit that ushers in a new era in which schools could pay their athletes directly if all of this is eventually approved. Now, on top of name, image, and likeness payments, for the first time ever, players will be able to share in revenue they help generate. But the NCAA will likely need a Hail Mary in the form of Congress. Listen here. Or look here, the president of Notre Dame, for example, reacting to the news, saying in part, quote, to save the great institution of college sports, Congress must pass legislation that will preempt the current patchwork of state laws, establish that our athletes are not employees, but students seeking college degrees, and provide from further antitrust laws. They are calling, Chris, on Congress to help. Congress does little to nothing, it's fair to say, in the form of legislation. Where does this go?
America's obsession with college football is profound. Yep. It is deep. Yep. And we could go back in history. You could find the time that Teddy Roosevelt actually was the guy who saved college football in its infancy because of the dangers about the concerns about all the dangers and all the people getting hurt. Politicians have been involved in how we do college sports for a long time. But I will say this. The haves and the have-nots, these wealthy programs, these big programs, you're going to see professional athletes on one side and then collegiate athletes on the other side. And if I was at Notre Dame, boo, stipulate for the record, boo. If I was at Notre Dame, I'd say, we got to keep this phony baloney. They're pros, but also amateurs at the same time.
They tried until there was a 9-0 Supreme Court decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I just think that, number one, the NCAA had years where they could have addressed some of the concerns about the treatment of college athletes, the way that college athletes are treated like they're just there to win for a team and not there to get a degree.
That's right.
And as soon as they're dispensable to the universities, their bodies are ground up. And if they get injured, all of a sudden they lose their scholarship and they were given nothing. And the NCAA for decades refused to address that. And now they're being forced to admit that they paid their coaches millions of dollars. They rake in millions, if not billions of dollars collectively on the backs of these athletes. So yes, pay them. And I just want to say one more thing. Notre Dame.
I'm here for this.
I was ready. Notre Dame, with his violin, Woe Is Us, their endowment is $18.9 billion. They have the money at the Power 5 schools. Yes, the other schools can't do it, but they're not the ones asking for this.
I saw Red Lobster go Chapter 11 bankruptcy, right? I didn't hear Red Lobster saying, Congress, come save me.
I'm sure the Darden restaurant thought about throw us a bone.
Talk to me about antitrust laws.
Yeah, so the NCAA is a 501c3, and Congress has resisted historically over the years, even before Barack Obama, to provide them with that exemption to save what I call the purity test, that these are athletes that choose to go to college, they're students first. But they're students and they're athletes, and they've been exploited over the years. And so now the chickens are coming home to roost in connection to the NCAA. They're being forced with this settlement, but there are tons of other lawsuits out there that could opt out of this settlement.
Even if
this is just the beginning.
Yeah, even if this goes forward, it doesn't close their liability going forward.
And there's nothing to save, really. The NCAA as we know it, right? It only has two pieces. It's the basketball and it's the football championship. And it's the only income derived from those two pieces. And so look for the financing on this to change. There are only 5 big conferences with big colleges. And those 5 conferences are the ones that are going to drive all of this. The smaller colleges, medium colleges aren't going to be able to afford to do this. Look for private equity to step in.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here because once upon a time I was a Division I athlete. Not in a non-revenue generating sport. But I would be one of the people. Yes, I would absolutely be one of those people going back and saying, "Hey, I didn't get paid for my name major. Like, let me have it." But the NCAA fumbled this rollout. In my opinion, they were woefully unprepared, completely fumbled it, and now they want to be bailed out. Frankly, I think the NCAA is run by a bunch of cowards who won't say that women's sports should be for women. So I don't trust them really to handle anything. But I don't also trust Congress to come in and all of a sudden fix the problem too. And I don't blame athletes, by the way, for saying, hey, you want me to play for your school? You should give me $1 million. Why not?
You ever go to a D3 football game? That's fun.
Yeah, it's great.
Small school sports are great because there really are student athletes. Nobody out there is playing for a pro contract. Nobody out there is playing for pay. There's real school spirit. The band sounds good. That's fun. This has turned into professional sports.
But there are 1,000 NCAA schools. There are 70 Power 5 schools.
Yes.
So we're not talking about, even in Division I, our HBCUs, that is not what we're talking about. And again, these Power 5 schools, yes, they want Congress to intervene because they've been raking in the money and spending on everything.
And they want to protect that. But here's another thing.
Yeah, I'll give you the last word here, and then Chris has a fabulous show coming up on Sunday that I want to talk about.
So good.
There are only 3 sports that generate revenues for these colleges, though. It's just basketball and football. You know the third one?
What?
Volleyball. Now women's basketball seems to be changing, but volleyball.
Yeah, and maybe in the South, too. I think college baseball probably generates, and maybe in the Midwest, hockey, et cetera, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you this much. As a former terrible Division I college athlete, and hearing from you, there's a lot of folks feel the exact same way as Carly, who went through the whole process.
Offensive lineman?
No, and I wasn't the kicker either. But
Probably
there's a lot of that sentiment. What do you got coming up here on the Hill?
I'm up for it.
This weekend on the Hill, Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we have a lot of good stuff to talk about the news, but we also have something special, sadly too special, which is a Republican and a Democrat, a member of Congress, sit down together, and what we talk about is what we owe the fallen. What do we owe the fallen in terms of our citizenship, our participation? How do we need to conduct ourselves to be worthy of the sacrifice of the people who died to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution?
Chris Steyerwalt, The Hill, Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. We started the show talking about, the unofficial start of the summer, but of course, this is Memorial Day weekend, and a weekend to think about all those things and reflect. Other side of the break, by the way, honoring America's heroes, how one nonprofit is paying tribute to America's veterans as we head into this Memorial Day weekend. Some of that, it's awesome to see. Leland Vitter joins us other side of the break.
I'll connect you.
All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. A group of veterans touring the World War II Memorial on the National Mall earlier today. The free trip made possible thanks to the Honor Flight Network, a nonprofit that flies veterans across the country to visit the memorials built in honor of the sacrifices that they made for our country.
This is my first time at the memorial, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. It's been a great experience. It's a lot of fun. Meet some very interesting people and seeing a lot of wonderful sights.
Host of On Balance, Leland Vitter. I've covered a few of these over the years, as I'm sure you have. It's always awesome to see him.
It is, and it's always special to see them either at Arlington or the Vietnam Memorial connect with the names of their buddies.
Yeah.
And, we always think about on Memorial Day, this is when we remember those who were killed.